I'd like to take a few minutes and read to you an excerpt from an interview with the composer John Cage, which was featured in the 1982 September issue of Keyboard magazine. The interview is very skillfully and carefully conducted by Tom Darter. And when I wasn't able to find a copy of this interview online, Tom Darter very kindly sent me a Xerox copy of this interview. I was so moved by this interview at the time of reading it that I wrote to John Cage, care of Keyboard magazine, and very soon received a reply from him, and we carried on a correspondence for some time. And I was later able to spend time with him and found him to be very considerate, thoughtful, very kind and open. His books, Silence and Empty Words and A Year from Monday, had a profound effect on me as a teenager and into my early 20s, and they continue to have some kind of an influence on me even today. I'll read through this excerpt, and when I say Darter, it means Tom Darter speaking, and when I say Cage, it means John Cage is speaking. So I hope you enjoy this little excerpt and look into the mind of John Cage. Darter. You've often said that you have a strong objection to a lot of standard Western classical music. Cage. Where the theory of it overcomes the experience of it. That happens in Muzak, it seems to me, and I was actually referring to the use of Muzak in Japanese hotels and coffee shops. Darter. But the Muzak turns out to be European classical music? Cage. Right. And what's so objectionable is the continual appearance of cadences, half cadences and full cadences, every 4 or 8 measures, so that the cadences, the theory of the music, becomes more noticeable than the variations from the theory. I told you the story about the African prince who heard a whole program of Western music from before Bach to the 20th century, and they asked what he thought of it. And he asked, "Why did you play the same piece over and over?" Darter. You're talking about the cadences, but the reason the cadences are there is that expectation is a big part of European classical music. Don't you think that the theory involved in tonality is intended to set up expectations in the listeners? Cage. I suppose so, but I can't stand that attitude towards music. Darter. Well, I'm thinking that the expectation involved in the idea of cadences may be one of the reasons you don't like it. Cage. I don't like it. Darter. Because the dominant chord leads you to expect a tonic chord. Cage. I don't like that attitude towards music, nor do I like that attitude towards life. I think we ruin our friendships and our love for other people by thinking that we know beforehand what they'll say and what they'll do. That what we love about people is their unpredictability, rather than the fact that they'll do what we think they'll do. And what I love about art is the fact that the nature of art is such that someone is going to make something that we haven't yet experienced. Darter. A lot of people approach friendships, though, through maybe comfort would be the word. They like being around certain people precisely because they know what they're going to do, and that makes them comfortable. Do you think that approaching music the way you do makes people uncomfortable? Or only to the extent that they're expecting something else? Cage. I don't know. I think the comfort that you speak of may be close to the life insurance kind of comfort, and I prefer the kind of joy that is described in Emily Dickinson's poem. In insecurity to lie is joy's ensuing friendship. Because if you want friendship or you want your art in order to be comfortable and not to be in any way disturbed, then you will have your friendship and your music and your art under certain circumstances when what you need is fulfilled, but all of the rest of the time you'll be miserable. Whereas, if you take Emily Dickinson's point of view, or the one that I'm proposing, which is the same, you'll be at a concert 24 hours a day. I mean to say by that I don't, except for a few hours perhaps in deep sleep at night, when I may not be aware of hearing, but the rest of the time I'm listening, even when I'm asleep, not in deep sleep, but in the less than deep periods of sleep during the night. I hear sounds, and I hear them in such a way that I enjoy them rather than that they wake me up. Even a burglar alarm, which I sort of translate into a Brancusi-like experience, so that I notice the slight variations rather than being irritated by them.
When I hear what we call music, it seems to me that someone is talking, and talking about his feelings or about his ideas of relationships. But when I hear traffic, the sound of traffic here on 6th Avenue, for instance, I don't have the feeling that anyone is talking. I have the feeling that sound is acting. And I love the activity of sound. What it does is it gets louder and quieter, and it gets higher and lower, and it gets longer and shorter. It does all those things which I'm completely satisfied with that. I don't need sound to talk to me. We don't see much difference between time and space. We don't know where one begins and the other stops. So that most of the arts we think of as being in time, and most of the arts we think of as being in space. Marcel Duchamp, for instance, began thinking of thinking of music as being not a time art, but a space art. And he made it a piece called Sculpture Musicale, which means different sounds coming from different places and lasting, producing a sculpture which is sonorous and which remains. People expect listening to be more than listening. And so sometimes they speak of inner listening, or the meaning of sound. When I talk about music, it finally comes to people's minds that I'm talking about sound that doesn't mean anything, that is not inner, but is just outer. And they say, these people who understand that finally say, you mean it's just sounds? Thinking that for something to just be a sound is to be useless. Whereas I love sounds just as they are. And I have no need for them to be anything more than what they are. I don't want them to be psychological. I don't want a sound to pretend that it's a bucket, or that it's a president, or that it's in love with another sound. I just want it to be a sound. And I'm not so stupid either. There was a German philosopher who's very well known, Immanuel Kant, and he said there are two things that don't have to mean anything. One is music, and the other is laughter. Don't have to mean anything, that is, in order to give us very deep pleasure. Oh, you know that, don't you? The sound experience, which I prefer to all others, is the experience of silence. And the silence almost everywhere in the world now is traffic. If you listen to Beethoven or to Mozart, you see that they're always the same. But if you listen to traffic, you see it's always different.